Hey everyone, it is day 66 of our 2020 Focus Bible reading. We are on Matthew chapter 9, and this is what we read. It says, Jesus stepped into a boat, crossed over, and came to his own town. Some men brought to him a paralyzed man lying on a mat. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the man, "Take heart, son, your sins are forgiven." At this, some of the teachers of the law said to themselves, "This fellow is blaspheming." Knowing their thoughts, Jesus said, "Why do you entertain evil thoughts in your hearts? Which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has the authority on earth to forgive sins." So he said to the paralyzed man, "Get up, take your mat, and go home." Then the man got up and went home. When the crowd saw this, they were filled with awe, and they praised God who had given such authority to man. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at a tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Then John's disciples came and asked him, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus answered, "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, or the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst. The wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved." While he was saying this, a synagogue leader came and knelt before him and said, "My daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her, and she will live." Jesus got up and went with him, and so did his disciples. Just then, a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be healed." Jesus turned and saw her. "Take heart, daughter," he said. "Your faith has healed you." And the woman was healed at that moment. When Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house and saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes, he said, "Go away, the girl is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took the girl by the hand, and she got up. News of this spread through all that region. As Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he had gone indoors, the blind man came to him and asked him, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" "Yes, Lord," they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their sight was restored. Jesus warned them sternly, "See that no one knows about this." But they went out and spread the news about him all over that region. While they were going out, a man who was demon-possessed and could not talk was brought to Jesus. And when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees said, "It is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons." Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." Okay, again, lots of information here of Jesus and his healing ministry and his power. But I think it's important that we understand a context here, that Jesus is giving a rationale for why he's healing. Because when they bring him the paralyzed man lying on a mat, Jesus saw their faith and he said to the man, "Take heart, son, your sins are forgiven." Very often in their day especially, people would simply assume if somebody was sick, if somebody was injured, if something bad happened to somebody, it was because of some sin in their life or some sin in the life of their family, their parents, somebody did something wrong, and then therefore that's why this person is in the condition that they're in. And that was just kind of a given in their culture. And so Jesus comes along and says, the very first thing he says is, "Your sins are forgiven." let's take that off the table, and let you know that your sins are forgiven. Which honestly, of the most important things going on in this man's life, that was one of the most important. I'm sure he felt guilt. I'm sure he felt all sorts of things. Was he a sinner? Sure, we're all sinners. So anybody who could find themselves injured or in a bad spot or sick, would really be like, well, yeah, I guess my sin did cause that. But they'd wonder, then why isn't my neighbor who sins that way caught up in this too? And so Jesus takes that off the plate. But then he says, because they thought that was blasphemous, the only person that could forgive sins was God. But now Jesus is making that claim that he could forgive sins. Nobody else in the story of Jesus has yet ever made that kind of claim. So that's why they're now like, hey, this is blasphemy. But Jesus, I love his response. He says, which is it easier, to say your sins are forgiven or to say get up and walk? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So he said to the paralyzed man, get up, take your mat, and go home. And it's interesting because they have no power to kind of see a man raised from being paralyzed. I mean, that wasn't something they had the power to do. Jesus says, not only do you lack that, I'm going to prove to you I have the power to forgive sins by doing this. And that puts in the context, the message that we're getting about the power of God and the mission of Jesus. The mission of Jesus was to come and to forgive sins. It's why he came. And I think it's very interesting that he goes right from that to calling Matthew a tax collector, a hated person, to come and follow him. And then Matthew's first response is, yeah, absolutely, I'll follow you. Why don't you come to my house for dinner first? And he brings in all the tax collectors, all the sinners, and everybody's upset that Jesus is hanging out with them. Pharisees are especially ticked off. And Jesus says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. And so, this chapter really, chapter 9, gives us the context for much of what we're going to see as Jesus reaching out to those who are sinners, those who are kind of outcasts on the outside, and he's looking to bring them in. And there's power in that. And so that's the part that sticks out to me today. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 10. Have a good one.